Okay, so we are live. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to everyone who is joining. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Elise Beckles. I'm the founder here at the French Tutor. And today, this afternoon, we have a really cool opportunity for us to chat with some, what I would consider some incredible French learners. So with me today, I have the privilege of hanging out with some of our co-op students from the University of Toronto, who we always have a pleasure every school year to get great students who love the language, who add new ideas and insights to our environment, our ecosystem, and give us different perspectives and what's happening in the current French space and different ways of learning, all that good stuff. And it's been really beneficial for us. So we have three of our existing co-op students. We have Sarah, Victoria, and Lauren. And today we're going to have a really transparent conversation about their French learning journey. So very often, I know many of you are parents of French learners or even you're adult learners and you wonder, man, do I have to have a certain history with the language to start? Do I have to have done this thing since I was a kid? Or what are sort of the different journey and pathways that you can engage on and still be successful at French learning? So today we're going to hear that. It's important for me to have you guys hear from people who are doing the thing right now. So we're going to have a couple of questions and we're going to keep this really conversational. If you happen to be watching live and you do have a question that comes in, feel free to type it in the chat and we'll see if we can get to it, or even after the fact, we can respond to it. So I want to put this first one out there, this first question. And the first question for you guys today is, what inspired you to pursue a major or a minor in the French language? Okay, I want to know, like, why French for each of you?
I can go first. So I'm hoping to practice medicine in the future, and I knew that I always wanted to practice with French, or at least be able to travel in a way where like my career could accommodate for the language. So that was really it. And I also have been studying French since elementary school. So I knew I enjoyed it and I just wanted to continue it. So even if I wasn't doing medicine, I think it was something that I wanted to continue doing.
Right on. Very cool. Sarah?
Yeah, I think for me, my goal is to be a teacher. I really love working with kids specifically, and I always personally found that the languages are such a perfect opportunity to not only get to know students within an academic context, but also to get to know them personally as human beings and as learners. And for me, that's really important as a teacher, is to really form a connection with students. And I feel like through the French language and studying French, whether it's in the elementary school curriculum or even in the high school curriculum, a lot of the stuff that you're doing is working with, what are terms for mental health. Like I remember that was a unit in one of my French classes, like how to, like even basic things like personal writing, writing essays and stuff like that. It's such a great opportunity to get to know students' personalities and for them to really come through as individuals. And that's something that always really intrigued me.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. And Lauren, I'll have you jump in as well.
Yeah, so I learned French ever since I was a little kid, and so I always wanted to keep the language, which inspired me to just continue with it even during university and high school. I always found it to be a very beautiful language as well, and um I think it's always a plus to know another language, especially in Canada where French is a second language, and so that's why I continue to pursue French.
So great. So great, guys. So great starting out. And you know what? As I sit here, I cannot help but notice, and trust me, it wasn't a thought before, but now it is. So I'm staring at you guys on my screen all at once. Look at the diversity that is on this call. And it leads me, it gets me very excited because I always have told people and parents French is this unifying or language, period, but French for us is this unifier that unless you are looking really closely at it, someone else might see so many differences on this call I see similarities. I go, wow, like look how this language can unify and bring all different types of people and backgrounds together. So, who can share, like, if you as well have seen French being a different enlightenment? Like, do you feel like your cultural awareness has been activated in a different way from language, or like what observations in yourself have you seen French kind of bring certain pieces and maybe opposing pieces in your life together?
I kind of have an interesting story when I went abroad because it was an international program, so it wasn't just through my university, like it was throughout the world. Could go to France, and they encouraged, although like a group of us did speak English, they encouraged us to solely speak French, and that's because there were some people that didn't understand English and didn't only spoke their language. So the only common ground that everyone had was French. And I feel like in Canada, a lot of people will, like most people will speak both English and then at least like a little bit of French, but there was solely French. So it was definitely a learning curve because I find that sometimes I speak like Fringlish a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
But there it was like only French. So it was something like very beautiful that like you have like so many differences amongst the group, but you guys all have that common ground, which is language, and like being able to communicate with people that you wouldn't usually, just because of distance, is like really amazing.
Yeah. For sure. Anyone else want to take that one?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that French is definitely, it's such a rich language in terms of its history and the way that it's managed to travel all across the world for several reasons, of course. But I think that because of that, something that's really beautiful is that for me, like when I started learning French, it was primarily through movies, like French films that I just happened to sort of,
Mm.
encounter. And I really loved them. And one of the primary reasons was because of Francophone films. And it was so beautiful to see this sort of mixture of French cultures with, let's say, like Algerian cultures and Caribbean cultures, different places where French is spoken. And I always thought it was so interesting to see other cultures sort of come through French and to
Yeah.
learn about different. I think when we think about like learning French, you think of France itself, but I think there's so much more that can be explored there. And it's so beautiful to learn about so many different countries all across the world just by learning this one language. You can be exposed to so many different cultures, and it's such a beautiful experience.
Right on. And I always share that as well. Like our family is Trinidadian, and there's so much lingo where I'm like, do they know? Or like places and cities, I'm like, do they know this is French? They do. But it's just crazy that I'm, of course, more privy to like the fine print of the language and exactly what it means and why that is maybe funny in French, even funnier because of the exact term that it means. So it is quite the like the fine print, I would say, of a lot of language and culture connects maybe in ways that you're not even aware of just yet. Just yet. Yeah, interesting. Lauren, did you want to add to that one?
I think Victoria and Sarah said most of everything I was
No
thinking.
worries. Yes, and guys, you just respond. I will jump in wherever you feel best. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to tackle, because it is a part of the journey, and I'm usually really transparent about French being this language that is not easy. I say it is a language, there's lots of rules, a lot of exceptions to the rules, and sometimes you're just straight up memorizing some of your conjugations and you tell me Naison, you guys know it's like, I'm just memorizing this, right? So speak to a little bit of what have been, obviously all of you are doing French at the university level right now, but even speak to growing up, maybe if that's where you started or wherever you began your French journey. What have been some of the challenges you would say that you have encountered along the learning journey? And what tools or tips have you used to combat that?
For me, in elementary school, I think it was a lot with grammar, like you were saying. The way I kind of tackled that was I would try to use the proper grammar when speaking because I felt like that was more application based. And
Yes.
if I'm just writing it down, like there's a like conjugation paper and I just have to write it down, that was like I don't think I was really applying my learning. Another one, I keep going back to my trip to France, but I think it was such like a kind of culture shock to be there. And then I learned that a lot of my education, while it did cover like the basics and maybe like the academic version, a lot of the little like lingo and small terms that I would never, it's not like my academics fault, right? Like it's just things that I wouldn't know unless I lived through the experience. So I remember one of them in the gift shop. I wanted to have like a little bag for my postcard and I didn't know what it was called. And I just had to kind of like get rid of my embarrassment and I just had to ask and I was like, "How do you say this?" And it was literally just like a for a pouch, like a pochette. And I never would have used that word before, but I think just like applying it and feeling like after that I would apply at every store that I went to and I needed a little postcard. I felt so confident and I was like, "Yeah, I know the word."
I love
Um
it.
but yeah, it's kind of funny because I felt like a little embarrassed asking, but they love it. Like they love that you're learning the language and everyone there was so excited and they're like, "Oh, please ask." Like don't feel embarrassed. It's everyone, because everyone there, they kind of know when you're a tourist and they're like, everyone needs to learn. Like, don't feel embarrassed. Yeah. So it was a really good like experience. But I think what I learned from that is literally just ask. Just don't feel embarrassed. Don't feel embarrassed, just ask and apply it. Because if I just learned the word and then after that I didn't ever use it, it wouldn't have stuck. But because
Right.
after that I went to buy more postcards with more pochettes, then now I know. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's so good. And you're saying exactly what I would normally recommend to parents or people learning French, period. Just go for it. Just go
Yeah.
for it. Ask the questions. Admit, I don't understand, or I'm not sure. What is this called? What's that vocabulary clarification? And you're also saying, once you know, now you implement, right? You'll
Exactly.
never be confused about that again, but you almost broke your own limitation by asking the question and getting to your response sooner. So that's great. That's like an overall, I would say, tip, like an overall
Yeah.
rule of thumb.
I think another piece of advice is that like no one's expecting you to know everything. People are expecting you in the nicest way to make a mistake because that's like it seems like the cheesiest form of advice is like make mistakes, but it's true. Like
Yes.
you're not going to learn if you're 100% perfect all the time because no one is. And again, like no one's expecting you to know everything.
Right on. Great, Victoria. Yeah. Anyone else want to contribute to that one?
Yeah, no, I feel like the same thing for me as well, in terms of the grammar and things like that. For me, funnily enough, like I'm doing a French major, but I didn't go to French immersion growing up in elementary school or high school. So the shock coming into the later years of high school and the early years of university to then suddenly have to learn so much linguistics and grammar and syntax, all these things, it was definitely a switch that my brain had to make because these concepts, these rules and everything, they weren't necessarily intuitive for me. But I think for me, the main way that I sort of combated that was to just implement French in my daily life. And I guess that for me would be the biggest piece of advice is just do it. It doesn't have to be scary. Because I think when a lot of people think about practicing French, for example, especially with those, more difficult things like grammar and syntax, they think, oh, I have to, like you said, memorize everything and I have to do all these worksheets to practice. But it can be just as simple as I remember one of the things that I did. I just switch daily things to French. For example, like my phone, I would switch it to like the language settings to French. And that way I just sort of had it there. I knew how people phrase things in French, or even like I used to do a gratitude journal every day. It was a quick little thing. I would just write like 5 little bullet points of things I was grateful for. I switched it to French. That way I was practicing my writing every day and it wasn't scary. It wasn't this big, scary, long worksheet that I had to complete that a teacher was grading or someone else was grading. It was just something that was a part of my daily life and it helped me practice, the rules of French in a way that didn't feel so strict and sort of overbearing.
Really cool. Well done, guys. Yeah, great tips so far. Lauren.
Yeah, for me as well, like Sarah and Victoria said, I struggled most with grammar. I think as I got older. I think when I was younger, I just like spoke the language without even thinking, and like grammar was like the last worry I had. But as I got older and then as we kind of become more like cautious and like worried about being wrong, I just kind of like didn't speak it as much and was just more like thinking about, oh, like is this the right grammar? Am I saying this correctly? And so to try and kind of overcome that, I try to familiarize myself more with the
Mhm.
language. 'Cause as I got older, like I didn't have more of like a French speaking environment with me. And so I would try to watch more like films, more TV shows on Netflix. Even try to listen to some music just so that I can like, practice my brain. And like what Sarah said earlier, like change my phone setting to French. Obviously, I struggled because I don't know like all the words and stuff, but I think it just helped my brain like think more and just like have French always around me just so I don't forget it. And just like I think a tip is like just like speak it. Even if you think you're wrong, even if you don't know it, just like keep talking in French and keep like surrounding yourself with more like French friends or even like shows, music, whatever it is. Like I think it will just help you with your speaking, with your confidence. Yeah.
Amazing, guys. You guys are getting me so excited about this because it's so like you're saying things that I know people literally keep inside. I'll hear it long after the fact about, man, I struggled with this or like this was hard, but here you guys are sharing, yeah, yeah, it was hard. Yeah, I had some challenges with this particular area, but now here you are. Because I always say to be doing French at a university level, you guys are adults learning French. It's it's a beast. I'll never forget when I was doing my French degree. I always say the hardest class of my lifetime was linguistics in university. I said, who invented this course? Why? It's like the science of the language, guys. My mind was worked, and like overworked. But there's got to be that theory part, which, that's what school and post secondary offers. But then the practical that a lot of you brought into it as well, like writing a gratitude journal. That's not an academic requirement, but these are the everyday things, the Netflixes of the world, the travel where you're implementing, where you're even being in environments that you're getting to practice and make the mistakes and fail forward, which is the whole thing with language learning. You gotta practice it. We have to bring it to life. Okay, very good. So the last question I will ask you guys for today, and I want to maybe position it a little bit differently, like speak to the part where you feel the most comfortable, but it would be surrounding, what advice would you give to students? And we're going to classify students. They can either be children, as some of you started, or you guys started as adults. What advice would you guys give to French learners who are just starting? And I'll stop there. I'll stop there. Yeah, let's start off with you, Victoria.
Okay. My first advice would probably be to engage in conversation. I think that's the main way that you learn, and you gain confidence. I think that's kind
Ah,
of like the main barrier when you're learning a new language is confidence. And just, yeah, speaking with a friend or a family member that maybe knows the language a little bit better than you, so maybe they can guide you. Um, or even just speaking French with like a mentor. Um, yeah, so just speaking the language is the overall advice, the umbrella advice.
beautiful. Love it. Sarah?
Yeah, honestly, I think the number one piece of advice for me would probably be exactly what Victoria said is, working on developing the confidence to get over the anxiety of making mistakes around others. Because that, I don't know, in my experience, tutoring kids in French, and even I'm sure that applies to adults as well, written French always seems to be stronger than oral French just because it is harder to have spontaneous conversations if you haven't had the practice just sort of showing up and talking about a random subject, that you might not necessarily have all the vocabulary on. It's difficult to
Yeah,
form full sentences
yeah.
and keep grammar in mind and all those things. So definitely keep practicing just to, ensure that you sort of understand the style of how a French conversation flows, because obviously it's different depending on what language you're speaking. But also, I think if that's something that it does seem too daunting, I think that just immersing yourself in French culture is also a great way to expose yourself to vocabulary terms and things like that. For example, like I said, watching movies, or Lauren mentioned songs too. If you're just taking a walk and you have a French song playing in the background, it might be a great way to, maybe necessarily you're not going to learn more about French linguistics, but you may learn a new word that you didn't know before, and that's still a
Yes,
step up. You know what I mean?
for sure. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I also agree with Victoria and Sarah. I would just like my biggest advice is just be consistent. Obviously it's gonna be hard, so just be a little patient with yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Just like take advantage of like the resources around you, like watch French films, TV shows, music. I think that will all like help in any way, like whether it be like pronunciation or just like your confidence in like speaking French. I think a lot of people can gain a lot of knowledge from just watching films in that language.
Beautiful. Well, guys, this has been such a great chat. I am so honored, to be honest. Sometimes sharing your own journey is a little bit like it's a little bit of a scary thing, but I'm honored that you guys had the courage just to hop on with me and have an honest conversation. Like I said, there's so many people around us and in our community and our networks that do have their children on a French learning journey, and they sit on the opposite side of, I don't know, if this is a good idea. Like, where will it take them? Then we have adult learners who maybe they want to explore it, but they don't think they can. So I think everything we've shared today has been relevant for some area of a French journey that someone is on. And I definitely think that you guys dropped some gems that people are going to take some notes on when they do see this live. If they're watching now, yes, we have a few watching now, and when they do watch the replay. So thank you guys again so much. I appreciate you, and everyone else. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.